Hello there. Let us continue solving questions on iteration statements. And currently, we are solving questions from the nested loop patterns category. In this, we have already completed questions from these subcategories. And in this video, we will pick up the next two subcategories, which are the right aligned right angle triangle subcategory and the right aligned inverted right angle triangle subcategory. Now, each of these two subcategories has got one question each, which means we're going to solve two questions in this video. So let's get started with the first question. That is the one from right aligned, right angle triangle subcategory. So this is what we're supposed to print for n equal to 5. Now, what is the next step? Well, the next step is what we have been doing so far, which is to draw a grid around this, number the rows, number the columns, and try to find a relation between the row number, the column number, and what we are supposed to print. So let me quickly draw a grid around this and then continue with the discussion. So this is how it would look like with a grid drawn around this. Now, what are we doing here is for n equal to 5, we have got a total of 5 rows, right? And what are we doing in each of the row is we are leaving some space, then printing an asterisk, right? This holds true for all of the rows except the last one. So to understand how to print this pattern, let's take a look at each row one by one, starting from the first row. And when I say first row, I mean the row where the value of I is 0. Now over here, what are we doing is, like I said, we're leaving some space. And how many spaces have we left over here? We have left a total of 8 spaces and we are printing one asterisk. And this is when I is 0. Then when we move on to the second row, that is the one where I is 1, what are we doing here? Well, here we are leaving 6 spaces and we are printing an asterisk, then leaving a space and printing an asterisk. So for now, let's just consider the number of asterisks that we have to print, which is 2. And if you're wondering, what about the space that we have over here? Well, we will handle it separately. But for now, what we can do is we can generalize this by saying that every pair of continuous asterisk will be separated by a space, right? As you can see, this holds true in the next row and the row after that and the row after that as well, right? So we'll keep this in mind, but we will not take this into consideration right now. Right now, we'll try to understand the number of spaces we have in any row and the number of asterisks that we have in that row. And this we will consider as implicit. That is, if we print a pair of asterisks, there has to be a space between that, right? So let's not remove this. Let's just move it from here and keep a note of it separately. All right, moving on. When we are on the third row, that is when I is 2, we're printing a few spaces here as well. And there are a total of 4 spaces and 3 asterisks. Then when I is 3, over here we have got 2 spaces and 4 asterisks. Then when I is 4, we have got 0 spaces and we have got 5 asterisks, right? So this is what we will get for n equal to 5. Now what is the next step? Well, the next step would be to determine how to decide the number of spaces that we are going to leave in that particular row, right? Because as you can see, in each row, we are leaving different number of spaces. So we'll have to figure out a relation between them so that we can implement it. So for that, what am I going to do is I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it over here and then continue the discussion. So as you can see, for I0, 8 spaces, for I1 6 spaces, for I2 4 spaces, 3 2 spaces, and 4 0 spaces, right? Now over here, one thing will be constant, and that is in the last row, which in this case is when I is 4, there will be 0 spaces. And it is not just for the case when n equal to 5. Even if you take n equal to 6, the same thing will hold. That is for the last row. And in that case, that is when n equal to 6. When I is 5, it will be the last row. Over here, there will be 0 spaces, right? So what we have just discussed is the last row will have 0 spaces. So if we start from the last row and go all the way up to first row, what will we observe? Well, we will observe that when we go from the last row to the second last row, the number of spaces increases by 2. And when we go from the second last row to the third last row, the number of space here as well is increasing by 2, right? And if we say it the other way, it will be when we go from the last row to the third last row, the number of spaces is increasing by 4. That makes sense, right? Because 2 got added over here and 2 got added over here. So it will be a total of 4. Similarly, when we go from the third last row to the fourth last row, number of space will increase by 2, right? So a total of 6 spaces got added between the last row and the third last row, right? Then from the third last row, when we go to the fourth last row, which also happens to be the first row, what's going to happen is 2 more space will get added, correct? So what have we discussed so far? We've discussed that in the last row, we will have 0 spaces. Then as we move up, the number of spaces are going to increase by 2 in every row, correct? So if we combine this, will we be able to figure out the number of spaces required in the first row? Well, looks like we can. Because if you see this, what do we have here? We have got a total of 2 multiplied by 4 number of spaces, right? Now, where is this 2 coming from? Well, this 2 is coming from the fact that we are adding 2 spaces as we move up the row, right? And where is this 4 coming from? This 4 is coming from the fact that we are doing it 4 times. Simple, right? Now, this 2 is a constant because we are adding 2 spaces as we move up the row. But this 4 will not be a constant, right? Because if we had, say, 10 rows in total, we would not go for 2 multiplied by 4. We would go for 2 multiplied by a different number. So we'll have to figure out how to determine this 4. So for that, let's take a look. Since we started from 4 and went all the way up to 0, we did this 1, 2, 3, 4 times, right? Now, if we had, for example, n equal to 6, we would have started from 0 and we would have gone all the way up to 5. So we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we would have gone for 2 multiplied by 5, right? So do you see this? When n equal to 5, we are going for 2 multiplied by 4. When n equal to 6, we are going for 2 multiplied by 5. And you would have understood that if n is equal to 10, for example, we would have gone for 2 multiplied by 9, correct? So can we say that this, that is 2 multiplied by 4, is actually 2 multiplied by n minus 1? We can, right? So what did this give us? This gave us the number of spaces we need in the first row. So before I write anything further, let me clear this up a little bit. So this was 2 multiplied by n minus 1, correct? Now, take a look at the number of space we have to leave in the first row, which is 8, and the number of space we have to leave in the second row, which is 6. Can we say that 8 minus 2 will give us 6? We can, right? So 8 minus 2 will give us 6, 6 minus 2 will give us 4, 4 minus 2 will give us 2, and 2 minus 2 will give us 0. What am I implying is, if you know the number of spaces left in the previous row, for the current row, what you can do is, take the number of spaces left in the previous row, subtract 2 from it, and you'll get the number of spaces that you're supposed to leave in the current row, correct? So, because 2 into n minus 1 was the number of spaces left in the first row, in the second row, will it be 2 multiplied by n minus 1 minus 2? It will be, right? Similarly, will this be 2 multiplied by n minus 1 minus 2 minus 2? So minus 4. And this will be 2 multiplied by n minus 1 minus 6 and 2 multiplied by n minus 1 minus 8, right? Now take a look at this. So over here, this is a constant, as in 2 multiplied by n minus 1 is coming in each and every row. What is different over here is what we are subtracting from it. So in the first row, we are subtracting 0, right? Because this is same as writing 2 multiplied by n minus 1 minus 0. Here we are subtracting 2, here 4, here 6, and here 8, right? Now take a look at the value of I and what we are subtracting. And what would you notice is what we are subtracting is actually 2 multiplied by I, right? So when I is 1, we're subtracting 2. I is 2, we're subtracting 4. For 3, 6, and for 4, 8. So can we generalize it now and say that what we are subtracting is just 2 multiplied by I. We can, right? So what will this expression simplify to? This will be simplified to this. It will be 2 multiplied by n minus 1 minus 2 into I. Or we can write this as 2 multiplied by n minus 1 minus I, right? So this is the expression that we can use to count the number of spaces that we have to leave in any row given the value of n and the value of I. So this is something we'll keep a note of separately. So let us put it down here maybe. All right. So now we know the number of spaces that we will have to leave in any row. I mean, the expression to find the number of spaces that we will have to leave in any row. So now let's focus on the number of asterisks that we have to print. And for that, let me quickly put the value of I over here and the number of asterisks over here. All right. So this is a pretty simple relation. It is simply A is equal to I plus 1, right? The number of asterisks that you have to print in any given row where the row number starts from 0 and goes all the way up to n minus 1 is simply the value of I plus 1, right? This holds true for each row. So let's take a note of that here. All right, so with this, we know how to count the number of asterisks we are supposed to print. So is this all? No, there's one small thing that is still to be discussed, which is the space that we are supposed to leave between any pair of asterisks that we are printing, right? And we had kept a note of this separately and we were supposed to discuss this. So let us discuss this now. And for that, let me take any of the rows. Let's take this one, for example. So over here, what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to print this, right? And there are two ways in which this can be handled. One is we print an asterisk, then we print a space, then we print another asterisk, then another space, another asterisk, another space, and lastly, one more asterisk, right? So over here, what will this give us? This will give us 4 asterisks and 3 spaces, right? Which is exactly what we need. The other way is this. What we do is we print an asterisk and a space together. So if we go that way, what will happen is because we need 4 asterisks, we will end up printing this. This gives us 4 asterisks, which is exactly what we need. But this gives us 4 spaces, right? There's one extra space at the end, which we will not get when we go by this approach. But the extra space at the end over here is not really a problem. What I mean is, if you print an asterisk over here and then leave a space, is this going to affect how our pattern looks? No, right? And because it doesn't affect how our pattern looks, we can go by this way also. So now we have got two options, this and this. Which one would you prefer? Well, if you ask me, I will prefer the second one. Why? Because this is directly related to the number of asterisks we are supposed to print. See, we were supposed to print 4 asterisks and we are printing this group 4 times. But if we go by this way, we will have to print the 4 asterisks, right? We'll also have to print spaces between them, which is fine, but we will have to ensure that we are printing an asterisk at the end and we are not leaving any space, because in this approach, we are not supposed to leave any space, right? But as we know, leaving a space is not a problem. And if we can do that, why not group this? And when we group this is what we get, right? So let's go by this way. What we will do is, instead of printing just an asterisk, we'll print an asterisk and also leave a space. So this is another note for when we start writing the pseudocode. All right. So what have we discussed so far? For n equal to 5, we are supposed to print some spaces at the beginning and then print some asterisk, right? Now we know that on the basis of the value of n and the row that we are on, which is denoted by I, where I starts from 0 and goes all the way up to n minus 1, 2 multiplied by n minus 1 minus I will give us the number of spaces for that row, and I plus 1 will give us the number of asterisks for that row. The other thing we'll have to take care of is printing an asterisk and a space together, right? So with all of this discussed, let's start writing pseudocode. So since n equal to 5, we will need 5 rows. So we'll say for I equal to 0, I less than n, I plus plus, right? So because n is equal to 5, what's going to happen is I will go from 0 all the way up to 4, which is what we need. Now here, what are we supposed to do first is print some spaces. And for that, we'll first of all need to know the number of spaces we are supposed to print. So let's call the variable in which we will store that as sc, that is space count. Now the expression was 2 multiplied by n minus 1 minus I. This will give us the number of spaces we need. So when n equal to 5 and I equal to 0, sc will be equal to 8, which means we need to print 8 spaces. So what we can do is we can iterate 8 times. We can go from j0 all the way up to sc minus 1 with an increment of 1, and we will print a space. Once this is done, the next thing that we will have to do is print some asterisk. And for this as well, we will need the count, which is simple, which is I plus 1. And what we will do next is we will go for j equal to 0, j less than AC, j plus plus. And like we had discussed, what are we going to do is print an asterisk, leave a space, and that is it, right? So what's going to happen here is when I is 0, we'll print a few spaces, then we'll print an asterisk and a space. Now, when I is 1, we want the printing to start from the next line. And for that, what we will have to do is put a println statement over here, right? So with this pseudocode, we'll be able to print this pattern. And with this discussed, let us go to IntelliJ and let's start writing the code. So over here, I have src. Inside this, I have iteration statements, then questions, and here we have nested loop patterns. Now here, I'll create a package with this name, which will be right aligned, right angle triangle. So let me quickly create a package. And inside this, let's create a Java class. Let's name it Q1. Let's have a main method and let's declare a variable called n initialized to 5 and then start the main loop, which will be I equal to 0, I less than n, I plus plus. Then the first thing we need to do is print a few spaces. And for that, we need to count the number of spaces. And we know we can do that using this expression. Now, once we have the count of number of spaces, what we will do next is iterate that many times. So j is equal to 0, j less than space count, j plus plus. And then what are we going to do is print a space. That's it, right? Then once this is done, we will go for the asterisk. And for counting the number of asterisk, we'll have a variable called asterisk count. This will be simply I plus 1. Then we'll have a loop here as well. So int j equal to 0, j less than asterisk count, j plus plus. And here we're going to print an asterisk followed by a space, right? And after this, we're supposed to leave, as in we're supposed to put system.out.println so that the cursor shifts to the next line, right? So with all of this done, let me run the code and see the output. And this is what we get, which is exactly what we needed. So we have solved this question. So with this done, now let us move on to the next question. So for n equal to 5, this is what we're supposed to print. I've already drawn the grid, numbered the rows and the columns. So let's get started with the discussion of how are we supposed to handle each of the rows, right? And for that, let me quickly make some space first. All right, so let's take a look at the first row. What's happening in the first row is we're printing a few asterisks separated by a space. Now, handling spaces between the asterisks is something that we have just discussed. So let's just keep a note of this over here and move on. So what's happening in the first row is, that is when I0 is, we're printing 5 asterisk. That is all, right? Then when we take a look at the second row, that is when I is 1, we're printing a few spaces. How many spaces? We're printing a total of 2 spaces and we're printing 4 asterisks, right? So in the first row, when I was 0, we were printing 0 spaces. Now let's take a look at the third row. So when I is 2, we are printing a few spaces again. And how many spaces are we printing? Well, we are printing 4 spaces, right? So when I is 2, 4 spaces and 3 asterisk. Then when I is 3, we're printing a total of 6 spaces. So I3, 6 spaces, 2 asterisk. And lastly, when I is 4, what are we doing is printing a few spaces. How many? 8 in total, right? So 8 spaces and 1 asterisk. And like the last example or the last question that we had solved, what we will do first over here is determine the relation between I and the number of spaces, then determine the relation between I and the number of asterisks that we're supposed to print, and then continue from here, right? So let's first of all take a look at I and the number of spaces that we are supposed to print. So let me quickly note that down over here. So when you take a look at this, you immediately know the relation between them, right? The number of spaces that we are supposed to print is just 2 multiplied by I. See, when I is 0, 2 multiplied by I is 0. And that is the number of space that we are printing. When I is 1, we are printing 2 spaces, which is 2 multiplied by 1. I2, 4 spaces, 3, 6 spaces, and 4, 8 spaces. So for space, the relation is pretty simple. That is 2 multiplied by I. Now with this done, let me first of all clear this and then discuss the relation between the value of I and the number of asterisks that we are supposed to print. So this is how they are related. As in, this will be the pair. That is when I is 0, number of asterisks would be 5, I1, number of asterisks 4, I2, number of asterisks 3, and so on. Now when you take a look at each pair, you would notice something. When you add them up, that is, add the value of I and the number of asterisks you're supposed to print, you'll get 5. This holds true for all of the pairs that we have, right? So can I say that I plus A is equal to 5? Now, if you're wondering where is this 5 coming from, it is coming from the fact that n equal to 5. You can try it out with n equal to 6, draw a similar pattern for n equal to 6, and you'd see that the first row has got 6 asterisks in total. The second row would have 5 and then so on. So this can be simply written as I plus A equal to n, which means that A, that is the number of asterisks that we have, is n minus I, right? So we've got a relation for number of asterisks as well, which is simply n minus I. Now, with these things known, that is, there has to be a space between a pair of asterisks, and 2 multiplied by I is going to give us the number of spaces in that row, and n minus I is going to give us the number of asterisks in that row. Can we write the pseudocode? We can, right? So the pseudocode of this will actually be similar to this. All we will have to do over here is replace the relation for space count with the one that we have just discussed, which is 2 multiplied by I. Similarly, replace the relation for asterisk count with the one that we have just discussed. And when we do that and we run this code, we will get this pattern. So because the pseudocode of this one is similar to the one we have already discussed, all that we will have to do is replace the relation for space count and asterisk count. We will straight up go to IntelliJ and we will write the code for this. So for that, let's come to IntelliJ and let me quickly create a package with this name, that is right aligned inverted right angle triangle. So for that, let me copy this. And here we'll create a new Java class called Q1. And what am I going to do is copy the main method from here and paste that here. Now, like we have discussed, we will need to replace or change the expression that we are using to calculate the space count and asterisk count, right? with that change done, we should be able to print this pattern. So what was the expression for space count? Well, it was 2 multiplied by I, right? And what was this expression for asterisk count? It was n minus I, right? So with this done, let's run the code and check. And we are getting this as the output, which is exactly what we needed. And with this, we have solved the second question that we were supposed to solve in this video. Now, I kept these two subcategories intentionally short. That is, I have got only one question in these two subcategories. In the previous subcategories, the number of questions were more. The reason being, over here, we are printing asterisk in every row, right? Although the number of asterisks that we are printing is changing, but all we are printing is asterisk. There can be variations of this question. For example, in the first row, you would be printing A once. In the second row, A twice. In the third row, A thrice, and so on. Or you could be printing A in the first row, then A and B in the second row, then A, B, C in the third row, and so on. The reason I did not take those questions up are that we already know how to relate the row number that we are on with the letters, right? So for example, this question, here we are printing E in the first row, D in the second row, and so on. Or if I take a look at, say, this subcategory, here we're printing A in the first row, then B in the second row, and so on. Also, we're printing A in the first row in this question and AB in the second row. Similarly, ABC in the third row, and so on. So this is the reason I kept these two categories relatively short. All I did was discuss how to print this pattern. Now, if you are given a variation of this, that is, you're supposed to print A in the first row, B in the second row, and so on, you very well can handle it because you already know how to relate the row number and the column number with the character that you're supposed to print. That character could be a number, that character could be an asterisk, that character could be a letter as well, right? So with this, we've come to the end of the video. So I hope I've been able to teach you something new and useful. And if you have any suggestions, feedback, or queries, feel free to put them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.